So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's training and development workshop. My name is Julie Cameron, and I have the absolute pleasure of hosting today's session, which is with the amazing Dianne Lowther and is entitled An Introduction to NLP. So, we have a screen full of lovely ladies all waiting to hear your words of wisdom and your golden nuggets, Dianne. So, over to you.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and lovely to see you all. So before I start, I have a really important question. If you've already got some NLP training, will you just give me a little wave? Just Paula. Yes. Is that you as well, Kira? Yes. Okay. Anybody else that I didn't see? It was a tentative little wave? No. Okay, good. So thank you for coming, given that you don't really need an introduction, but I hope you'll still find something useful here. And those of you that are brand new to NLP, who don't really even know what it is, well, you're in the right place because I'm going to start right at the beginning with some apologies to Mal and to Julie because the first 10 minutes you've already seen because I did this at my showcase last month. But I thought, well, I do need to start right at the beginning. So my background is I have a degree in psychology, and I discovered the opportunity to learn NLP about 30 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 30 years ago, sort of early 1990s. And I did a practitioner training, a master practitioner training, and then qualified as a trainer of NLP by 1996. And later on, I qualified as a master trainer of NLP. So I've done a lot of learning and I've learned lots and lots of different trainers over the years. I've done even more training. Last time I counted, I definitely done my 10,000 hours. So the big challenge for me with a 40-minute session is NLP is a huge subject. Practitioner training is 20 days, master practitioner is another 20. So I've got 40 minutes. So the challenge is, what am I going to share with you in 40 minutes that will be of value, will be interesting, will be useful? You can tell me at the end whether or not I've succeeded in that. So let's start with some basics of, well, what is NLP anyway? So let me just share my screen with you so you can see my slides. I'm not going to have the slides on all the time because I'd rather you saw me rather than look at the slides, but some things we have to put in. So the neuro bit tells you it's to do with your nervous system, your brain, and everything else is attached to that. The linguistic bit indicates that it's about language, not just words, also non-verbal language. So our body language, our facial expressions, and everything else that goes up to communicate a message to other people. The programming bit is often the bit that makes people stop and pause for a moment. So the reason for that is if I'm saying brain and programming in the same breath, people kind of go, oh, it's brainwashing, but it's not. The programming bit is about habits. People often say, don't they, human beings are creatures of habit. So when we have something that works for us, we just do it over and over again. Once we've learned how to do something, we do it in the same way, repetitively. So the programming bit of NLP is about looking at those habits that we have and seeing how well they work and seeing if we can change them, if we want to change them, learning from other people's really good habits, and so on. So if you think about it, all the things that you can do really well, you can do without any conscious effort. And a classic example of this would be something like driving the car, where when you first learn to do it, it takes a lot of conscious effort. You're thinking about, what am I doing with my hands, with my feet, where am I looking? And there's a lot to sort of think about. And eventually it becomes a matter of habit, so that now you've been driving a car however long you've been driving, and you're able to just get in the car and go where you're going. You don't have to think about what are you doing with your feet. You just brake when you need to. So all of the things that you're really good at doing are like that. You do them without giving them any conscious attention. Unfortunately, it's also true of the things that don't get you such good results. You also do those without giving it much conscious attention. And then sometime down the line, there's that sense of, oh, I did it again. I intended to do something different and now I've done that again. So the programming bit of NLP is about looking at our habits and seeing how successful they are. So my best example of this that most people can relate to is most of us have a habit of what we do in the morning when the alarm clock goes off, or if you don't need an alarm, when you wake up. Most of us do the same things in the same order every morning when we get up. Yeah? And we don't even think about it. We just get out of bed and get on with what we normally do. Yeah. Those of you that've got little ones, somebody puts me in the chat about a 2-year-old. Well, okay, maybe not in your case, because if you've got little ones in the house, anything can happen. We all know that. But left to yourself, you probably will do the same things in the same order every morning. And the result is that, after half an hour or an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, you're there ready to go and start your working day, whether that's leaving the house or it's going to your home office, whatever it is that you do. And the question then is, are you in the right state of mind? Are you in the right physical state to go and do your day's work? So all the things that you did since getting out of bed that you do every morning, have they brought you to a point where you are suitably dressed, you've had a nice, nutritious breakfast, and you're feeling positive and upbeat and ready to go and face your working day, bringing with you a bag with all the relevant things in it? Or is it something else? Because if it's something else, that suggests that that time you've spent between getting up and then being at the place where you're ready to start your working day, that suggests that that program has got some room for improvement. So we look at these little programs of behavior in two ways. One is the end result what we wanted? And then when the end result is what we want, we can also look at, are we going about it in the most efficient and elegant way? Because if your process means that every morning you spend 10 minutes staring at the contents of your fridge, wondering what to eat for breakfast, yeah, then I would suggest there's a bit of room for improvement. Yeah? Or it might be you're staring at the contents of your wardrobe, wondering what you're going to wear today. Yeah? Again, those are things that maybe you could do the night before, so that when you get up in the morning, you can just go through your morning routine, really simply and in a very straightforward way, without having to think too much. So that's what I mean by programming. And practically everything that you do will have a little program for it, even down to, choosing what to cook for dinner, deciding what to watch on TV at the end of the day. When you're working with your own clients, figuring out what's the best way to approach your clients' needs today. We have little programs that we run through because that's what makes us feel like we have skills. In fact, that's what skills are. They're programs of behavior that give us a specific result. So that's what I mean by programming. So neuro-linguistic programming. Programming comes about by looking at what we do, what we think, what we say. Yeah. So that's one definition of what NLP is. I also want to share a second definition, which is perhaps a little more obscure. So I'm going to show you this on a slide. Those of you that want to scribble it down or take a screenshot of it. So this is the official Society of NLP definition. NLP is the study of the structure of subjective experience. Shall I say that again? NLP is the study of the structure of subjective experience. And people often say, what does that mean? Quite rightly so. There's two words here that are specifically important, and I'm going to get rid of the slide before I go into this. Okay, so structure is a really important word there. That's structure as opposed to content. So in most of our daily lives, what we're interested in when we talk to people and when we're thinking about ourselves is we're focused on content. So you say to your friend, did you have a nice weekend? And they say, yes, I did, thank you. And you say, what did you do? So they tell you what they did. That's the content. Yeah. Somebody says to you, I'm reading a really good book. And you say, well, what's it about? And they tell you a little bit about the story. And that's the content. But thing about content is that it doesn't tell us anything that's meaningful in other contexts. Whereas if you look at structure, if you look at the way people think and the way that they talk, those patterns will hold good in other conversations, in other activities, in other contexts. So, for example, if you say to your friend, "Did you have a nice weekend?" and they say, "Oh, yes, I did, and I went here and I did that," and then what you might notice is that the thing that made it a nice weekend for your friend is that they went and visited other people. So spending time with others was something that was important to them and led them to feeling like they'd had a good weekend. Yeah. So that might tell you something about that person that holds good beyond this conversation. Does that make sense? And when it comes to language, people have habits and patterns in the way that they use language. People have habits and patterns in the way that they think. We're not always privy to that unless they choose to tell us, but those patterns are there nonetheless. And if you know something about the patterns that somebody employs most of the time, then you can start to predict something about how to connect with that person, about what sorts of words will make it easier for them to relate to you, about how to get onto their wavelength. So in terms of the definition of NLP, that's what we mean when we talk about structure, is we're looking at how people do things, less than looking at what they're actually doing, because that's where the patterns are, that's where the meaningful information comes from. And then the other thing that's important in that definition, that NLP is the study of the structure of NLP. No, not of NLP. NLP is the study of the structure of subjective experience. Subjective experience is a phrase that's really key here. And what that means is that people live in their own version of reality. And the reason for that is if you start with the idea that you have at least 5 senses, some people would say there are more than that, then you probably know that research suggests that if we were to take in all the information that's available to our senses, it will put our brains into overload, that we can't process that much information. And so what happens is that our brains filter the information that's coming in so that we're only really paying attention to quite a small amount of the information that's available to us. In fact, let me give you an idea of the scale of this. The best estimate that I've come across recently is that there's 6 billion bits per second worth of information available to your 5 senses. Okay, that's 7 zeros. That's a lot of information. Yeah. At the conscious level, your brain can only process so much. And this is something that fluctuates with what's usually defined as IQ. So people with a high IQ normally have a faster processing capacity than people with a lower IQ. But the average is about 135 bits per second. That's 135 bits per second on the inside, derived from 6 billion on the outside. Okay, that's a huge filtering job. Yeah. And that's why you can sit in a meeting with 3 other people and talk about the same things and discuss the same solutions and come up with what you think is a kind of shared plan. And then a week later, you can't agree on what it was that you decided in the meeting. I'm sure most of you've had that experience at some point in your working life. Yeah. And you think, were we in the same meeting? And the NLP perspective would be, no, you weren't, because actually you were each in your own version of that meeting and you were making sense of it through your own filters and ending up with a different version of reality, which is what we call your subjective experience. And that, of course, is also the reason why you can go and watch a film with a friend and you come out of the cinema and you say to your friend, "Oh, that was brilliant, wasn't it?" And they say, "Yeah, it was okay." Yeah. And have you had that happen to you? And you think, but I thought it was wonderful. How come you don't see that? Yeah? And that's because they've been filtering the experience through their own experiences, their own memories, what's important to them, and so on. So everybody lives in their own version of reality. And in NLP, this is often referred to as your map of the world. Yeah? And it is just a map. It's not reality. but it's the nearest thing to reality that we have. It's our subjective experience of what's going on. And one of the key things in NLP, that's sort of one of the cornerstones. One of the key things is the recognition that just because somebody disagrees doesn't mean that one of us is wrong. We've both got different versions of the same thing, and potentially, we both have a valid point of view. So what's all this got to do with business? I hear people say. So I think there are a number of different ways that you can apply NLP in business. Now, the background of NLP is that it came out of the therapeutic community. So initially, it was something that was practiced by therapists, and it was learning to use language skillfully to assist shifts in mindset and help people recover from mental health issues and come back into being much more functional. But it wasn't long before it was realized that those same techniques can take people who are functional and help them actually become excellent at what they do. So I divide the areas of application of NLP in business into 4 different categories. So the first thing is what I would think of as self-management. So it's all the things to do with managing your own state of mind, managing your energy, managing your output, your focus, making sure that you're doing the things that you want to get done. It's kind of avoiding the distractions and so on. And NLP gives us some great tools for things like focusing on your goals, for managing your energy, and inevitably for picking yourself up and dusting yourself down when something goes wrong or something unexpected happens and you find yourself in a different situation than you were expecting. So I thought I'd give you a little example of this just to have a go with. If you're willing to play, I'd like you, if you would, to think of something that you know it would be good for you to do. So it could be just a task that's on your list, or it could be something that you think would be a good habit to cultivate. But at the moment, it's not really getting your energy and attention in the way that would be best. Yeah. Can you think of something like that? I'm not going to make anybody talk about it. It's just something to do in the privacy of your own head. So you can think of something like that, and then notice when you think about it, do you have a picture in your mind's eye? Is there something that sort of flashes up, that represents that for you? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. Good. Okay. Now, notice where that picture is. Now, I'm not saying where are you in the picture. I'm saying where is the picture? Are you seeing it here, or is it right here, or is it up or down, or where are you seeing that picture? Yeah, and I would guess that the chances are, if it's something that you are not really giving a lot of time and attention to, it's probably not right here. Yeah. So this is your picture. You can do what you like with it. So I just invite you to move it from wherever it is and bring it in front of you, not too close. You don't want it right in your face, but bring it sort of close to you where you can see it. And just notice what a difference that makes to how you feel about it. Now, this may not be true for everybody, but my prediction would be that it feels like something you should give some attention to in a rather different way. It probably feels easier to give some attention to it when it's here than it does when it's over there, or Madeline says it's on top of her head. Yeah, you're not really going to give it much attention up there. So bring it around where you can see it and look at it. Just give me a little thumbs up if that feels a bit different now you've moved the picture. Yeah, excellent. Well done. And that's, we talk about that as working with submodalities, which is the structure of our thoughts. The pictures in your mind's eye being an example of a thought. Now, you can use this the other way around. Do you ever find yourself obsessing about something that happened maybe this morning or yesterday that didn't turn out the way you intended it to? So maybe you spoke to a new client and you came off the phone and you thought, oh, I forgot to tell them this, or, oh, I should have said this in a different way. Or have you ever had that kind of thing happen? Well, in the same way, if you think about that, you probably notice that it's right here, and that's why you can't stop obsessing about it. So just move it out of the way. Put that behind your head somewhere, and you'll find that its power over you diminishes, that it's easier to forget about it, focus on the things that are more important. So that's just a little example of what I mean by self-management. We all have days when, our brains are not quite doing what we want them to do. We all have days when our mindset's a little bit off, or, we get stuck thinking about something in a negative way. So that's a tool that you can use in that regard. So that's our first area of application. That's definitely for you. The second area is about communications. Now, most people come to NLP because they want to learn to communicate more effectively, or they want to learn to read other people more effectively. And most of the people that I've met, either, when I was first learning NLP, and I definitely went because I wanted to improve my influencing skills. Most people at some point will say to me, I didn't realize I was going to learn so much about me. I thought I was coming to learn about other people. But what you begin to realize is that, communication's a two-way process. So all the work that we do on ourselves makes it easier to communicate with other people. So communication with others, again, it has patterns. There are structures to it that you can observe, that you can learn, and that you can start to use when you're talking to individuals. Because when you understand the patterns in the way somebody communicates, it's almost like they're speaking a different language. And when you use the same patterns, it's the equivalent of you going on holiday to Spain and exercising a little bit of your Spanish knowledge. And people love it. They feel much more kindly towards you because you're speaking their language. And the same thing can happen when you use the same patterns of language as somebody who you meet and you want to interact with. They will feel much more connected with you if you're using the same types of language. So I'll give you some examples of this. You've probably heard about the difference between towards and away from motivation. That some people are motivated towards a goal. That what gets them going is the idea that if I do this, then I'll achieve something. There'll be benefits for me. Other people are more motivated by avoiding something going wrong. So whereas one person might look at their list of what needs doing and say, oh, I'll do that because I'll enjoy that, and somebody else is going to be, really happy when I do this. And, you think about all the good reasons to do it. Somebody else will look at the list and say, I better do that today because if I don't, it's going to cause a problem. Now, both of those things create motivation. So the job still gets done. That's the important thing to recognize. But they're a very different thought process. And, you might immediately recognize which one you do the most of, because, again, it's a pattern. And if it works for you in one part of life, you probably do it in other parts of life. So if you know this about somebody, it's likely that, they do it now, they're going to do it again tomorrow. It's like, those of you that have teenage children, if your child comes home and always does homework immediately, that's their pattern. And it's probably because they're towards motivated. Like, if I get this done, then I can watch TV the rest of the evening or play my video games or whatever. The child who comes home and watches TV and then reluctantly says, oh, I better go and do my homework. That's a more away from motivation. Like, I'm doing what I like to do, but now I've only got a couple of hours and I better go and do my homework because if I don't, the teacher will shout at me. Those patterns don't change. Right? They don't do one day and one the day. So that's what they do. And in fact, if you're remembering what you were like as a teenager, you're getting some clues now about which is your pattern in this regard. But there's language that goes with it as well. So if I've got somebody who I've noticed is towards motivated, then I might say to them, can you get this done by Friday? Because if you get it done by Friday, then that's going to make us look really good as a team, and it'll benefit other people who are looking for the results of our work. And also, if you get it done by Friday, once it's done, you can go home and relax for the weekend, and then you'll have a flying start for whatever's coming next week. That's the towards version. The language that goes with the away from version is quite different. Listen to this. I don't suppose you can get this done by Friday, can you? Because if it isn't done by Friday, it could cause us a lot of problems. And anyway, if it's not done by Friday, it's just going to hang over you all weekend and you're not going to be able to relax and enjoy your time off. Can you hear the difference? And you might have noticed one of those made you more inclined to do the task than the other one did, yeah? Which gives you a little bit of a clue. Now, some people do a bit of both. It's not black and white, yeah? But you will have a pattern in relation to this that you will tend to do a lot of the time. So that's part of what comes into communications from an NLP perspective. That's an example of what's known as a meta program. There are about 70 of them. And no, I don't know what they all are. I know about 20, and that's enough for most practical purposes. The other thing that comes into communications is this whole idea of structure. And I know quite a lot of people in the LoveBiz network work one-on-one with clients. So just give me a little wave if you do some form of coaching or one-on-one consulting or that kind of thing. Yeah, okay. So this might be something that you'll find useful. And if you do, then if you drop me a note afterwards, then I'll let you have these questions. But for now, I'd like you to experience it for yourself, because this is an example of communicating using structure rather than content. So if you're willing to play, could you think of something that is a bit of a problem for you? Not the worst thing that's going on in your life, but something that, if you could resolve it, then that would be a real benefit to you. Yeah. And again, I'm not going to get you to say anything about this, just do this in your own head. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to give you a few moments to think about the answer. You don't need to write anything down, just think about it. Yeah. And to say, if you want the questions, I can send them to you afterwards. Yeah? And then I'll ask the next question. So also, I can see you on screen, so you could just give me a little nod when you've had enough thinking time. That helps me gauge how long I need to give everybody. Okay, so the first question is, what's the problem? Okay. How long have you had this problem? Why do you have this problem? Who's to blame? Why haven't you solved it yet? So in this situation, what do you want? How will you know when you've got what you want? What resources do you already have that you can use to achieve your outcome? When I say resources, that could be people who can help you. It could be your skills. It could be, things like your courage and determination. It could be favors you can call in, or it could be time and money and that kind of thing. So what resources do you already have that you can use to achieve your outcome? When have you succeeded in something similar? And final question is, what's the next step? Okay, so having thought your way through all of that, would you just give me a show of hands if you now feel that something has shifted around that? Obviously, you haven't completely solved it because you're still sitting here. You haven't gone and done whatever you need to do. But who feels like I've got some fresh ideas? I could do something about this now. Yeah. Seeing if, yeah, yes. I usually reckon at least half of the time we get some kind of movement. And the thing about this I want you to notice is this is this is about structure. So I have no idea what your situation was, what you were working on. Right? All I've done is given you a thought process to work through. And many of you have actually come up with something useful. Teresa, you've got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question? Or was it a comment? Go ahead.
I didn't. I did that on by mistake. Sorry.
Oh, right. Okay. That's fine. You were just putting your hand up to say yes, you'd got some movement on it. Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. So that's what I mean by working with structure is that you don't have to know all the content. Yeah. So you didn't have to tell me what your issue was for me to be able to give you some helpful thought processes. So that's what I mean by working at the level of structure. And if you want those questions, I can send them to you. Also, if you go onto my website and go on the blog and put 10 question problem solver into it, there's a video of me asking those questions. So if you're ever a bit stuck and you could do with somebody asking you those questions, it's there. It's one of the most visited pages on my website. Okay, so that's that. We've done two things then, 4 areas of application. We've got self-management and we've got communications. The third thing then is known as modeling. And that's not catwalk modeling and it's not clay modeling. It's modeling of skills. So if any of you have worked in technology of any kind, you'll be familiar with the idea of creating models of processes and so on. And so this is about creating models of a person's skills and finding out what does somebody do to get the results. And obviously, if we're going to model somebody, we're going to model people who are really good at what they do. And this is where all of NLP came from, really, because the originators of NLP started creating this kind of work out of modeling some of the best therapists of their day. So they were really intrigued by the fact that some really great therapists are able to make a comment, ask a question, and it would create a mindset shift for a person. And they were just really curious about, well, what sort of language has that effect on people? And out of that, they developed this whole technology of modeling, which we can use, we can apply this to any kind of personal skill to get inside. How does somebody get great results? So it's a combination of looking at what are they doing on the outside that we can observe, but also are there some things on the inside that a person does that drives that? So let me give you a real practical example of this. Do any of you have difficulty remembering people's names? Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that a lot of people do from time to time. You meet somebody and you think, I was crossing the car park in the DIY store one day, and a man came towards me carrying a stainless steel kitchen sink. And I looked at him and I thought, I know that man. And he looked at me and he clearly knew who I was as well. So I said hello, and he didn't linger because he was carrying a stainless steel kitchen sink. And I walked into the store and I thought, who was that? It wasn't even that I couldn't remember his name. I had no idea who he was. I just knew that I knew him. And it took about 5 minutes before eventually the memory floated up. He was my hairdresser. But I'd never seen him anything other than immaculately dressed. So, we all have experiences where we just can't place something. But when it comes to names, there is something that you can do about that. And I've been blessed with a good memory. And all joking aside, generally speaking, I remember people quite well. It has tailed off a little bit as I've got older, if I'm really honest. But as a young person, I could remember people really, really easily. And one of the things that we do on NLP training is, usually at master practitioner level, we invite people to do a modeling project of their own. So find people who are really good at doing something that they'd like to be good at themselves, and model the skill, build a model of it and teach it to themselves. So I was one of the trainer's assistants on a course one time when somebody said that the skill he wanted to model was the ability to remember names. And he put a little notice up on the board and said, if anybody's really good at remembering names, I'd like to learn how you do it. And nobody answered his call. And I said to him one day, well, I don't know really if you'd say I was that good at remembering names, but I'm reasonably good. And we said, well, there's 100 people in this group. It was a big class as well. There were trainers' assistants. He said, do you know everybody's name? I said, yes, I do. And he said, how long did it take you to learn them? And I said, about 4 days. So he said, that's good enough for me. So he modelled how I remember names. And there were a number of things that came out of that. The first thing is, it was really important to me to remember people's names, and it still is. Because I feel that when you use somebody's name, it creates a level of connection that you don't get without it. And if you haven't seen somebody for a while and you remember their name, it makes them feel important. It makes them feel special that you've remembered who they are. So it was really important to me that I know people's names. And that was one of the driving forces behind it. What I also realized as part of the process is that I would only remember people's names if I consciously decided to. So, training has been my profession for about 35 years. I meet a lot of people. And normally at the start of a training program, I ask everybody their names and I would store it away. Because it's important to me to know who I'm talking to. But I discovered that I had to make that conscious decision one day when we had a power failure during the setup period. And when I would normally be saying hello to everybody and talking to them individually and learning their names, I was sorting out the power failure. And then when I came back in and I was saying hello to it, I just didn't take it in because I hadn't made that conscious decision. Right, I'm going to remember everybody's names now. So what that tells me is that sometimes we don't remember things because we're not really paying attention. So this is the first thing in learning to remember names, is clear the decks and decide, I'm going to focus on this person, I'm going to remember their name. And then it's really simple. You look at their face, you hear the sound of their name. If it's appropriate, you say the name back to them out loud. So if it's one-to-one and somebody says, hello, my name is John, you say, it's nice to meet you, John. Okay? So you've said it. If you're being introduced, as a whole group of people, and it might not be appropriate for you to say it out loud, but you still say it on the inside, you say it to yourself. And then the other thing that I do, and this is easy for me because I often meet people in training programs and conferences, is if they're wearing a name badge on the shoulder, I look at their name badge and see how the name is written. If it's not there, if it's a social situation and people are not wearing badges, I visualize it, which then gets me to say, oh, is that Carol with an E or without? So I can write it down. Now, what this is all doing is it's making the neurological connection between what the person looks like, how their name sounds, and what the name looks like written down. So then when I see the face again, I hear the sound of their name and I see how to spell it. If I see their name on a sheet of paper, their face and the sound of it comes to mind. So you're making that neurological connection between all the different bits. But what happens for a lot of people is without that conscious thought process, is you see the face, and then the next time you see them, you recognize the face, but you haven't got the connection with the sound of the name or the way that the name is written. Now, it does have some limitations for me. I struggle a bit with Chinese names. I find that and they need a lot of repetition. Yeah, Malan's laughing. Yeah, do you have the same issue? I need a lot of repetition with a Chinese name before I really get it, just because, it's something I didn't grow up with. For some reason, I don't have the same issue with Indian names. They seem to stick more readily. And some other parts of the world, sometimes the names are a little bit difficult. But if I'm looking at sort of English speaking nations type names, they usually stick quite well with me using that. And I've taught this process to a lot of people, and they tell me it's worked for them as well. But happy to let you have a go with that and let me know how you get on. But that's a way to remember people's names. And the key is that conscious decision, I'm going to remember names. As opposed to, oh my God, there's all these people here, I won't remember anybody's names tomorrow. Because as soon as you start saying things like that to yourself, you are setting yourself up to fail. So that's an example of modeling. And people that have been through my training programs, they've done projects on so many different things. Let me give you a few examples. Somebody modeled how to take verbal instructions of how to get somewhere. This is sort of pre-sat-nav days. And this man said, I get lost in a strange town. I pull up and I say to somebody, can you direct me to? And they say, yeah, you go down here and you turn left and then you come to this and you turn right and you go straight on for half a mile. And he said, I'm lost. I remember the first instruction. I go down and turn left and then I have to pull over and ask somebody else. So he found people who were actually good at taking those instructions and modeled it and was able to learn to do it. Had somebody who modelled touch typing, how to do that really effectively and accurately. Had another lady who looked at, you'll like this one, how to resist temptation in the form of food. And she lost 1.5 stone in weight by implementing that strategy without ever going on a diet. It was really good. Somebody else modelled how to reverse park a car. Yeah. So you can apply this to all sorts of just different skills, things that you'd like to be good at, but maybe you're just not quite as good as you would like to be. How am I doing for time? Oh, I'm just about run out of my 50 minutes, haven't I? So the final section, which I wasn't intending to do any demonstrations of, the final area of applications of NLP in business has to do with emotional resilience. And because it comes out of the therapeutic world, there are a lot of techniques associated with NLP that help us learn from our bad experiences, let go of the negative emotions associated with them, move through all of that and come out sort of wiser, but able to take today on today's merits and not seeing today in the lens of things that happened to us in the past. So that can be a really, really useful addition to your skill set. So before I finish up, just another couple of things that I'd like to show you on the slides. Just find that. And so if you would like to get started learning a bit of NLP, and I hope you will, I hope I've whetted your appetite enough. I am going to be running a couple of one-day introductory courses over the summer. So you can choose from 2 days. The 21st of June is a Saturday. The 9th of July is a Wednesday. And I'm doing this at Woodland Grange near Leamington Spa, which is not far from where I live. The price to anybody else is £275. But for all the lovely LoveBiz ladies, if you use the code LoveBiz at the checkout, you'll get a big discount and you can get your ticket for £114, which is £95 plus VAT for those of you that are that registered. So you get the opportunity to learn some of these skills, to practice in a small group. I don't normally get more than about 12 or 15 people to these events, so it's not like you're in a kind of massive crowd. And that day will usually help you make up your mind whether the NLP practitioner training is for you or not. So you've got the web address there at the bottom of the screen. I can perhaps put that into the chat box as well, so that you've got that to refer to. So that's not quite it from me, Julie, but I think that's enough for now.
That's perfect, Dianne. Thank you so, so much. That was insightful, intriguing, and has made me giggle throughout, actually, on references to myself. But for those that are listening on replay, on record, thank you so much for listening. We are now going to stop recording, and Dianne will be taking some Q&A. So thank you so much for joining us.